everybody. My name is Anne Desjardins. I'm your host for the Silver Lyming. I am so grateful to be here in a healthy capacity to bring forth to you stories of others getting better from something called Lyme disease and tick-borne illness. If you're not familiar, Lyme is something that is transmitted through the bite of an infected tick, and it can also transmit to that tick other infections such as Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Powassan virus, and we can go on and on. So do be aware if you have come into contact with a tick or you are in their environment and you're not quite feeling well and you're not really sure what's going on with your body, consider Lyme disease, but also consider the co-infections and make note that the standard testing, the two-tier testing, is at best 65% accurate, generally speaking, and it's only looking for Lyme. It is not looking for those other things that I had mentioned previously, which are good to know if you have going on in your body just for your treatment options. But again, this podcast is here to help to educate you a little bit more about Lyme, some of the symptoms and things that you could potentially expect to see if you are suffering from it, and then to, again, give you some hope because it is possible to heal. I'm very good proof of that. I have lots of other guests that I've had on before. I have a fantastic guest that I have here today, Payton Bradsky, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her in person now, which is wonderful. Her story was shared through a Facebook contact that I have about her and her brother. They're starting a company called Lymeless. So she's a co-founder in that. And it is something that's using AI technology to help Lyme patients in particular navigate their journey through this sickness and really understanding how best to help take care of themselves, which I can tell you from going through this that it is something that is going to help so many people's lives and make it so much easier because when you're sick with Lyme, a lot of people have neurological symptoms. And basically, what that equaled for me was that my brain was broken. And so it was very hard for me to understand what I was supposed to be doing for myself, let alone really to know where to start, to get information, to know what kinds of questions to ask doctors, what to think about when I was in my appointments. So, again, having a tool like this would have been monumental. And I'm just in awe and honored to know you and your brother, Payton. Thank you for being here with me. Carter was on a previous episode of mine, episode 36, if you're interested in checking out his story. But you both were infected. And if I'm remembering right, it's pretty much your mom, actually, who really ultimately sort of started the journey for your family down Lyme and tick-borne illness. And she struggled for a number of years to try to get an answer with what was happening to her health. And then ultimately, you and your brother realized that you both were suffering from it as well. Is that
Yeah.
fair synopsis? Yeah. So again, welcome here to our show. I was so glad to see you at the PA Lyme Resource Conference that we had about a month ago now. It was such a delight to meet you and your brother and just see how many people were already like waiting to talk with you about your product, to get it out there. I know you can talk more about this too, but just what that launch is going to look like, how people can go about signing up for more information about your product that you're developing, and really just if they're interested to use it, how they could go about becoming a subscriber. So if you don't mind, if you would just start for us with really, I know I touched on it lightly, but like, how did you become familiar with Lyme? How did that become more of a household word for you versus being just a normal person who doesn't really have any understanding about what this looks like at all?
Yeah. Thank you. You touched on so many great things. I'm really excited to dig into this and yeah, share more about my story and also what we're trying to accomplish with Lymeless and everything else. So yeah, so to start from the beginning, my like you mentioned, my mom was the beginning of all this for us. So our journey with Lyme started as sort of on a caretaker side. She was in a state where she was sort of getting progressively sicker. Her symptoms were developing slowly over time, but it was really interesting as her kid. And at the time, my brother and I were both, he was in high school and I was in the first few years of college. Um, and so I sort of got snapshots of coming home and seeing her health, and she was yeah, not doing too well over time, and we really didn't know what was wrong. She went to so many doctors, probably like 40 different doctors and specialists and top hospitals and all of that, which, you know, if for the people who are listening to this, I'm sure they're very familiar with, you know, the discovery phase and trying to figure out what's wrong and what's going on, and you know, all the tests are coming back clear, all of the scans and all of the lab work and everything else is not showing anything. And I think it's getting better now, slowly. But, you know, when she was going through this, it was definitely a challenge. And doctors were telling her, it's in your head, do more yoga, like really ridiculous, really ridiculous things, and yeah, being her kid, it was so tough because you're seeing your mom who is like this, light of the room, like super mom, just sort of, not able to come and help with Thanksgiving dinner anymore, just things like that. And so we were in a weird spot, trying to figure out what was wrong. And she was so strong in pushing and continuing to push, to find answers. And I think, one thing I want to touch on here is, Carter and I have reflected a lot on this, but when we were kids and weren't really familiar with it, we didn't know what to think. And I think we both went through different phases of like, Mom, is this really real? Like, why aren't you trusting the doctors? Like, why aren't, you're paying them for their advice. You're talking to these doctors. Like they know everything, right? Like, why isn't this, what could possibly be going on? And looking back on that, I feel horrible, obviously, because it was so much more than we realized and so much more than we had any concept of, as kids. But she was so strong in continuing to push and look for answers, and that was huge, and a huge inspiration that really helped, down the road when Carter and I both got our symptoms. And so yeah, so that was our real first interaction with it. And she was lucky enough to talk to a doctor, a naturopath at a graduation party. And she was like, "Hey, have you looked into Lyme? Here's a doctor who treats it. Like maybe check this out." And I remember her sending me the website for the doctor and being like, "Do you think this person looks legit?" Like she'd gone to so many doctors at that point. She's like, "Is this even worth it? Like I have to travel, and she gave it a shot. And luckily, thank God she did, because he really brought her back to life. Right. So that was huge. So that was our very first, interaction with Lyme, and sort of this concept of something that was hidden, this invisible illness that looks like everything else, and that no doctors understand and no one really knows what to do with. So that was the beginning. And she really went through the process of healing and sort of working with this doctor, and really got to a great place. And it took a few years, but she had her own, successful journey with it. And then my brother and I sort of started developing symptoms a little bit later. And so he touched on his story, and I can share a little bit about mine too.
Please.
So for me, I sort of, looking back, I noticed things right after the fact. I'm like, oh, well, now it makes sense why I felt that way. Headaches or weird fatigue or body aches or things like that. That seems like no big deal. And I'm young, I'm in college. Like I'm probably nothing serious. Like I just need to sleep, or I'm just stressed. And then my senior year of college, I was in the middle of, one of the most stressful quarters. I'm studying engineering, or was studying engineering at the time. We were doing our senior design project. I was looking at graduation, and I woke up in the middle of the night and felt like I was going to be sick, and then woke up on the ground, like this very dramatic, like crazy, right? I woke up on the ground to my mom saying like, "Oh, she had a seizure." Like this is, to the 911 operator. And I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on? And so that sort of spiraled, that started this whole cascade of exploration and figuring out what was going on, because it looked like, right, it was like seizure like fainting. But it was very dramatic and scary. And doctors immediately were responding with anti-seizure medication, and like thinking I was epileptic and putting me through all this testing, and like I had wires stuck to my head, and like MRIs and all these things. All of that came back clear. And this is something I had never had this happen before. It wasn't something that it's very possible to get epilepsy out of the blue, from what I understand. Like it can develop later. So it wasn't out of the question. But at the same time, there's a lot of things about how I presented with it that weren't typical. Like I was totally coherent when I woke up, and I was, little things like that. The scans were fine, tests were fine, all of that. And so we're going through this process of like, well, what is this? Is this, life altering diagnosis, and what's next for me? And I'm looking at the rest of my life and my career, potential career, and all of this, thinking like, okay, how does this look? What's going to happen? And so I was on this anti-seizure medication, and about a month later, I had another episode when I got food poisoning. So it seemed to be really related to like me feeling super stress, physiological stress. And at that time, because it happened again, and I was on medicine and whatever else, and the tests were clear and various reasons. Doctors like, okay, we don't think this is epilepsy. It's something else. Like, we don't know what's going on. And that second experience, I think want to highlight that, like, I had gone through this and had gotten a really bad concussion with the second one. And so I was going through this experience, this little mini crisis as a 21-year-old, being like, okay, I can no longer look at a computer screen. I just spent 4 years studying computer engineering. Like, I don't know if I can go into my career now. Like, they're telling me I don't have epilepsy. They're telling me they do. Like, I don't know what's going on. So that was like probably the peak moment for me, where I was the most scared and uncertain, and really having the hardest time, and in the middle of preparing to graduate, and it's supposed to be exciting and fun, and friends are doing things, and like there's parties and there's events and there's all this stuff that like I'm wanting to feel good for and trying to partake in, and just not feeling like myself. And so that was probably the lowest point in my process, my journey, where I was like really stuck and really feeling like, what's next? Like, what's going to happen? And luckily my mom had gone through her journey with Lyme. And so I went and got tested, and I was showing up positive for Babesia and Bartonella, and, little bits of Lyme markers and things. And we're like, okay, well, let's try to treat this and see if this is what's causing these symptoms. And that sort of kicked off the whole process, which ended up being about 4 years off and on of treatment. And then within this last year, I've finally gotten to a place where I'm in remission, I guess. So it's a long story, but that's sort of my my whole journey up to this point.
That's pretty intense. And I can't even imagine, like, just even going back to the fact of being a child and having to see my mom struggle. But like, again, we know that it's such an invisible illness and it's so hard to really see. And that would be very confusing as a young person. And then morphing into it having happened to you. Like, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to wake up and someone over me being like, yeah, she just had a seizure. Like, da, da, da. Like, that would be horribly terrifying. And so I'm glad that you were able to get a diagnosis. Like, I'm always sorry for people that have to go through this experience and have these things happen to their body, but I also can appreciate what I got out of it. So it's like, hopefully you're getting out what I've gotten out of it too, and like a very beautiful transformation and journey, but dang, like what a hard way to go. Um, have you had seizures since? Is this like, it was just those two seizures and then they started to treat you for the tick-borne illness and that kind of resolved, or are you still struggling with those at all?
Interestingly, they only came up when I got food poisoning,
Huh.
like very specific. I think
Huh.
what we've deduced, and through this process deduced, that like Lyme was probably had infected my vagus nerve or something, and it was causing
Yep.
this really dramatic
Yep.
response
Yep.
when my system was overloaded.
Right.
And so my moment where I was like, oh, I think I'm actually healed, was when I got food poisoning again a year ago, and
Where are
didn't
you getting
have
food
that.
poisoning from?
I
Hold on
know.
a second here. I'm
Well,
like,
that time was Florida, ironically, but
wait a
I don't
second here.
know.
Where are you eating, girl? You gotta stop going to these places. No more
Total adventure.
buffets, no more sushi buffet, whatever it is that you're doing. No, no, no.
I know, right? I was like, this is abnormally high rates of food poisoning.
Well, that's
Um,
one way to check yourself.
that's what I
I
thought.
must be in remission now. All right.
Yeah, that's honestly, that was the benefit of, yeah, I was like, okay,
Aw.
check the box. Like, this is really improved. But yeah, so those are the most dramatic symptoms. I mean, I had little things, right? Like you mentioned, like neurological symptoms that were like my brain was broken, right? And that was hard to manage, and hard when you're a young professional and trying to, compete in this world and be a part of things and advance and like be a part of these teams with such smart people, and yeah, going through times of being like, oh, why can't I get a word? Why can't I finish my sentence? Why can't I remember what I just said?
Yes.
A minute ago. It's wild, such a wild experience. And one of those things that's almost hard to believe, right? Unless you experience it. I think it's hard to believe that that even happens, because it's such a bizarre symptom.
Yes. And so where are you at now with that? Like that doesn't happen anymore? Or I guess maybe really what I'm trying to ask too is like, I think for me, I'm so far down the road of healing that I don't really remember those sensations in my body. Like I know it happened to me, but I don't really remember it as specifically as I used to. Like I would have a hard time talking about this before where I would start to cry or emotional breakdown or whatever. And people would be like, that's just because you're not healed yet. And I'm like, you know what? And like here I am now and I can talk about it, no problem. No tears. Like maybe occasionally I can probably trip myself up and if I start to feel sorry enough for myself or something, maybe it like, ugh, but
Mhm.
rarely. And so I think ultimately like that's a really good measure of true successful healing.
Mhm.
Um, not to like make you feel like, oh, maybe I'm not there yet or whatever, but like I'm just kind of curious, how far down that path are you feeling? Like, do you still remember what those sensations were like in your body? Are you far enough along yet to not remember?
Yeah, it's up and down. I think I also, it was really hard emotionally for me for a long time. It was very almost like PTSD. And I'd get anxiety about feeling like I'm going backwards or feeling like I'm, starting to have symptoms again and getting really scared that it's coming back or whatever it might be. And talking about it too. I mean, this is one of the first times I've really talked about it in a long time because it has been such a long journey of sort of like healing emotionally too. Um, and so reflecting on the process, I can remember pretty vividly some of those moments. But I think to your question, like knowing when you're healed, knowing you're in remission, because testing is really useful in understanding, right? Like, do you have active infection? Are the antibodies there? Like, what's happening right now? But also, it's not that combined with like the symptoms is sort of how Lyme's treated, right? And so looking at like when are you fully healed, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it. And I think for me, it was a lot of recognizing, okay, usually if I have a super stressful moment or super stressful set of a couple months or something, I start to decline and I'll feel tingling in my legs and I'll feel toxic and I'll feel like tense and I'll start to lose, have my brain break down a little bit and things like that. And in this last 6 months, I haven't had that happen. And it's probably been one of the most stressful seasons in my life ever. And so I would expect myself to break down. Right. And so those are those little, I think, gut checks for me of like, okay, this is where I usually would hit a road bump. And if I was sick and if I had Lyme still active and I'm not, so I must be healing. I must have the immune system stronger. And maybe the Lyme is far enough in remission or gone that it's truly healed. But that's actually something that we're really hoping to help patients uncover for themselves with Lymeless and with the app that we're building is the ability to track that and to see, what your symptomatic presentation was, because it's hard to remember with years of treatment, and some doctors will ask like, oh, have you taken amoxicillin? How'd it go? I'm like, well, I'm sorry. Let me just go through my list of,
Exactly.
you
Go
know,
back and see what phase that was in. Okay. Yeah.
right, right. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, giving patients tools, right, to be able to track this stuff and see how were you really feeling at this point in your life, and what were you taking, and what was your lifestyle like, and what was your environment, and all of those things, and then being able to see trends over time and understanding, progression of symptoms and general well-being. Um, and being able to see that over time. So I wish I had that. And I have journal entries, right? Random ones over time where I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I felt like that a year ago or 2 years ago. Um, but it would have been nice to have that continuously.
For sure. And I think that's a really great way to do it is to like make a portal for people or something maybe that they're like excited to check in to do or just something quick and easy or maybe you can make it have like a reminder pop up. How are you feeling today? 1 to 10. Like just something quick and easy for them to be able to track. And um like I know I wrote a piece about when I first got diagnosed and like even if I read it now, that actually can make me cry because I see how sick I was and I don't remember. Like I don't remember being that sick because I'm so far past that and I don't remember a lot of the specifics about it, which maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, I don't know. But I do think it's a great value that you're giving to people and having a place to do that specifically to track or to gauge or to measure because when you are healing and you're in the middle of it, it's so hard to
Mhm.
really say like, oh, today I feel good. and actually this is the fifth day in a row that I've had that. I feel good. Wow, like I don't really remember this many days in a row. Or maybe that's, you could do something cool like that, when you work out so many days in a row, it's like you're on a streak. Like you can have a good day streak for people so that they know that they're feeling good more than bad. But that's beautiful. And I just, like, again, I just can't think of better people, obviously, to design something than people who have gone through this. You have such insight and thoughts about really what matters to people to put into this, right? It's not like just a guy designing something about a woman's body and pretending that he knows everything about it, right? Like you've gone through it, both of you. And I think it's kind of nice too that you have so many like perspectives to come into it. Like you've got the family perspective, you've got your vision of what it looked like to see your mom go through this. You've got it as a sibling as well, seeing your brother go through it. You've got your own personal experience, but then you have like the male female energy because you've got your brother, you've got like a mom and a siblings kind of component too. Like I just feel like you're covering it so well from so many sides of what would really matter and think about with things. Um, and so now for you, you're like pretty much through it. Were there times when you were kind of questioning that you would get better when you were sick? And like,
Absolutely.
can you talk a little bit more about that and really what you would do to sort of encourage yourself or keep yourself moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made me think of sort of going through the process and getting worn down, right? When you're trying to heal and you're going through treatments and you don't remember feeling good or you don't realize when you had good days and when you didn't. And it comes to a point where you're like, is this even worth it? Like what's the outcome? Where's the end? Like, how's this going to go? And so, yeah, being able to see that over time is so huge, but also I think being able to recognize where you do need to take a break and sort of understanding where your body sort of needs to go with all of that. And so, sorry, I was going off on a tangent. Can you repeat
You're
your
fine.
question again?
Oh, now it's like, oh no, don't do this to me. Let me rewind. What did I ask you?
Was like, oh, I had all this stuff to say, and then
This
I.
is so bad when people do this to me and I'm like, oh, nikes.
Oh, you asked. I think you asked the times when or were there times when I didn't know?
That's right. Like, did you want to
Yes.
give up, or like, how did you keep yourself moving forward?
Right.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Between the two of us, we got this. Line power. Oh.
You got it. um, yeah, absolutely. There were times. And I think especially when, like I said, when you're going through treatment and maybe not feeling good or feeling like you're making progress. And maybe it's, the herxing is so bad or the overload and all of that is just so much that it's hard to feel like anything's getting better. And so, there were times where I thought I was good and I stopped doing treatment because I was like, I'm mostly there. I mostly can function. I mostly don't have headaches. I mostly am okay. And then I would start to get into these stressful periods again, and I would just go downhill. And it was so hard and tough because I distinctly remember like working. I worked in big tech for 5 years, and so I was in this big tech company and working as an engineer. And I'm surrounded by all these people that are so smart and just on it and clever and like fundamentally they just push each other, right? Everyone's just questioning each other and all in good you know intentions of like, let's get to the best solution, let's get to the best whatever. And there were times when my brain just couldn't keep up, and it was so hard for me because I had spent so much time like just wanting to meet that bar, I guess, that I've set for myself of like being this great engineer and being able to work with these brilliant people. And I already had imposter syndrome anyways. And so this really wasn't helping where I was like, what am I doing here? Do I deserve to be here? Am I even capable of this? And then my brain was shut down, And so then it was like, well, what's going on? How am I going to be able to do all this and build these great things and grow and learn and all of that. And I think one of the biggest lessons I learned throughout that process was, it's actually a miracle that our bodies work well most of the time, right? When you don't have diseases and things fighting you, because it's such a complex system. There's so much going on in your body all the time that the fact that, normal and baseline and all of that is relatively achievable is wild. It's crazy to think. And really what I think I learned, and what's huge for me in this whole process is learning at a young age that you can't expect your body to be perfect and performant and all of that all the time. It's just not realistic. And especially if you're not paying attention to what it needs and what it doesn't need. And when you need breaks and when you need, support and when you need, I don't know, like a beach trip or something. Just like, these things that help you feel better. And I think being young, I think we grow up feeling a little bit invincible and a little bit like, I bounce back, I recover, I get sick and I'm better. I'm, break a bone and I heal, like things are fine. And the reality is, they are until they're not, and it won't be last forever. And you really are responsible for, taking care of yourself, and you are the only one that knows your body as well as you do, right? And that's huge, and a huge lesson to learn when you're not only when you're young, just in general. I think a lot of people were told that the doctor has this solution or whatever it might be, and it works for everyone with this condition, or it works for everyone with this whatever. And it's wild. It's hard to believe that's true after going through this process and seeing how personalized health really is, and how personalized it should be in order to get people to a place where they're really feeling good. Because we're all so unique, right? And have such complexity in our systems. So I think, there were definitely ups and downs the whole time. And I had doubts, and I had times where I just stopped treatment altogether because I was so sick of it, so frustrated and so demoralized. And then, it would come back to bite me. And so I'd have to sort of go try again and see where I could get. But it's been a huge learning experience in how to take care of myself. And that health is, you don't have health, you don't have anything. So really focusing on that, right? Yeah.
Yes. And that's, I mean, I wish I had learned that at your age, because potentially I would have avoided getting sick,
Right.
because I just let myself go into the ground and thought I was a machine and could handle everything and do it all, and face plant, and got very sick for a decade. It was exciting. Yeah, lesson learned. But I mean, it's a hard way to go about learning it, but it has set you up for such better success. And I think about that when I was talking with your brother too. It's like, man, you're so far ahead of the curve. Just learning what you've learned now at this young age, it will just help propel you that much further and faster through life to get to the, I don't want to say the other side, but like to get to your dreams, to get to your goals, the things that you aspire to achieve, because you're going to understand it that much more, but you'll pay attention to yourself. And if we are not operating out of a space of love and caring for self, we don't have enough to give. We'll keep trying and we'll keep going, but we're going to probably go down in a tailspin. And that's one thing that I'm kind of grateful for, in one of those backwards ways, that this is a lifetime accountability coach, right? And while you're saying, okay, it's been 6 months that I was through a really stressful thing and I don't really feel bad, but like, if you keep doing that, you understand what's going to happen. And so, it just gives us a little bit more reason to do the self-care, to do the self-love, to make sure that we're getting enough sleep, or we're eating the right kinds of foods, or just taking care of self, listening to self. When the body's yelling at you, you've learned to listen. And that's again huge. And I also like the fact that you're talking about that there were times that you gave up on your treatment, right? Like it does get overwhelming. It does get annoying when your alarm is going off 5 times a day for different shifts of pills that you're supposed to be ingesting, and taking this tincture and doing that and blah, blah, blah. Like it gets old fast. And I mean, there was points in time I'm traveling around with a blender with celery so I can juice my celery and do this. And people think I'm a wackadoo. I'm bringing coolers with me. I'm trying, so like, I'm not, but it's not that fun sometimes. And it's like, I just want to be a normal average person. I just want to be able to go and enjoy my life and not have to think about this crap all the time. But so be it. That's kind of, again, what we've signed up for now, having had this diagnosis. I don't know too many people who really can stray too far off the clean path, if you will,
Right.
and not feel the repercussions later that have gone through this sickness. Like even for me, if I go too hard, too long, too fast, too furiously, and neglect self, I will feel twinges of what it used to feel like too. And it's like, oh, Oh, I
Yes.
remember. I remember that. Oh, heck no. Like, okay, girl, you need to get to bed sooner. Stop looking at TikTok all night long. Put your phone down and go to bed. Like, no. Much as you're learning, like, no.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm excited again for you just to see how that lends itself, that lesson lends itself to you as you go through this whole process. And tell me a little bit more now, specifically what you're doing. So I know you said you were working in big tech for 5 years. You studied to be an engineer. Then you get this thing where your brain can't even look at a computer anymore. Are you able to work with computers again? I'm imagining if you're doing AI stuff now that that part has got to be better for you, or maybe you can do all talk to text and you don't have to do anything anymore. I don't know. How does
Yeah,
that
no.
work for you now?
Yeah. So when I had the concussion situation, luckily it only lasted about a month, like 6 weeks. It took me to get back to a place where I didn't have those symptoms anymore. So thank God that happened. And then I was able to, look at computers and things like that.
Okay.
And so then after that, I got into, I started working at a big tech company doing software engineering for about 4 years. And then this last year, I was working in product, which is a little bit more strategic and high level. And sort of setting direction and things like that. And so I took all of that and was, as a patient, was working through my own treatment and thinking about like, man, tech could really make a difference here. Like this could be such a better experience for me if I actually could track this and understand what's happening and also have all the resources at my fingertips, right? Being able to, you know, look up actual Lyme specific information and stuff that's true and vetted and reliable and all of that, because it's sort of challenging to find those details and resources. And honestly, we had originally thought of this as building Lymeless and building this app to be something that helps with, the things we experienced as patients, like tracking treatments and tracking symptoms and journaling and all of that. But as we got into the space and researching, we learned about all these resources, right? Of communities and podcasts and organizations and conferences. And I didn't know to look for those things as a patient, right? Like
Sure,
when you're
sure.
sick with anything else, you don't really think to look for community, I guess. And so that was a huge revelation as we were getting into this and learning more about what we could build that would actually help people. And I think a huge component that that's sort of come of that process is bringing all these resources together, bringing it in through our AI, who it's Nurse Ella, or our companion, our AI companion, Ella. And so it'll be a resource for patients to be able to go and ask questions. It'd be like, what are some good diagnostics, or we're looking at, our goal is to help create like a physician matching down the road. And so, using Lymeless to track your symptoms over time, and 2 to 4 weeks in, being able to say, okay, this is the way you're presenting, like, we really recommend working with these doctors or these specialists that are Lyme literate and sort of vetted, and that we've really worked closely with to make sure that they're practicing and effective in their treatment process and all of that. And then bringing all of that together and bringing these resources to the patient and keeping them at the core of all of this, like making the patient's journey simpler, and helping them get to life beyond Lyme is how we like to say it. Because, there's a world in which, right, Lyme can be in remission, and maybe we're not going to be fully past it at any point, but you can get to a point where you're back to living your life and you're back to doing the things you love to do, and running and or painting or coding or whatever it might be that you really didn't feel like you could do when you were sick. And so that's sort of our vision, and our goal is to get patients to that point. But then at a bigger picture, we've been, because we found all these resources and these organizations, we've been talking to them and trying to find ways to bring everything together. Because I think the beauty of this community is that everyone wants a better future, right? For people with Lyme
Yes.
and
Yes.
co-infections.
Yes.
Like everyone wants a better answer than, I'm so sorry, good luck. Like here's, a few years probably where you need to treat this and work through this. And so we really want to try to bring all of those groups together and see how we can help facilitate with technology and bring together, researchers and clinical trials to patients, and finding ways to bridge these gaps between all these different organizations that are trying to further the community and develop standards of care. And that's what our biggest goal is. That's our entire, vision, is just like revolutionizing the way the world treats Lyme, right? And treats is a double entendre there. It's, treats it like sees it and views it, but also treats it actually, right? That's our biggest goal. And so, to your original question, what am I doing now? That I'm focusing
Building an empire.
trying to build this, just building this
I love
bridge,
it.
this community, and this resource for people, and keeping patients at the center and making sure they feel empowered. Because, like I said before, you're the person who's going to know your body the best. And so how do we give you more tools and more information that you can bring to your doctors and say, hey, look, like this is how I present with these symptoms, and this is how I respond to these treatments. Like, help me in a way that's actually going to work for me. And all of that. So yeah, that's sort of where we're headed with this, and our biggest goal. I think there's a really amazing community here that the people just really want to work together, and you don't find that everywhere. And I think that's what we're really trying to be a part of and contribute to, and sort of help connect the dots along all of these different axes. Because it's, my brother he's very good with quotes, but he has one that he loves to say, and it's individually we have a voice, but together we have change. And I think
Yes.
that's something that we talk a lot about, when we're making decisions of how to build things, is making sure that we're working towards that change.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful compass to guide yourself by and sites to look forward to seeing. And um, I remember talking to him, and maybe you were sitting there at the same time when we were at the conference, but like there are so many different groups in this community, but we all do want the same thing. And I remember when I first started my support group, for example, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this if it kills me. I've got to figure out a way to help people in my community, and I'm going to be that voice because there's no one else here doing it. And so I'm looking around and I'm like, what are other people doing? Okay, well, I see in the community next door that PA Lyme Resource Network has a group here. Okay, I think that looks smart to me because I can't drive that far. And if I need to go somewhere to see how they're doing it, because I was too sick, like I just couldn't drive that far, these people will probably be good because they're close by. At least I can get there and see what they're doing.
Mhm.
But then I was like, oh, wait, my friend is part of this Global Lyme Alliance group over here. These people seem really cool. Like maybe I should join that group instead. Maybe I should. And then there's like all these different groups. And it's like, well, I don't know which one to really be a part of. I just want to help. So again, I went with the local close by resource, and I'm really glad for it because it's a great group of people. But I think that there is uh, some integration work that could still happen in that community. And so it's really nice to have somebody, never even occurred to me to have a group to unite all of that together and
Yeah.
make that more sensible and accessible for people, because it is a wealth of information and there is so much out there. And I think I would also encourage you to keep in mind too, it's like one thing that I think you'll have as an advantage as well is that the support groups and stuff online, they have their purpose, but I really kind of stayed away from them because I felt like it made me less secure in the fact that I was actually going to get better.
Mhm.
Um, and it almost killed hope as opposed to giving hope.
Mhm.
And I'm glad because I learned a lot from those spaces, but I really didn't find overall that energy to be that helpful. And so I think where you'll come out on top is that, you can kind of um, put in the tone that you want to carry through your organization and more of a positive take on things and a hopeful one. And like, okay, these are the steps to getting better. This is what we have to do that. And again, you can get all the, like, what do they say? Like, why recreate the wheel?
Mhm. Right.
You can take all the little bits and pieces from these things that work the best and put them together as an overarching thing for people to have access to. I think that's fantastic because
Yeah.
how do you really know which way to go? How do you really know which way is up? How do you really know a lot of trial and error, So if you have a collected source of these stories compiled, then it makes it hopefully again a lot easier for people to digest the information, to get through it and figure out what's going to work for them. And you also touched on something too about bioindividuality, right? Like no two people are the same. Nobody's going to have the same symptom set specifically. It's up to what 100 symptoms of Lyme, and then we throw in co-infections. Like God knows what that permutation turns it into. So there's so many variables going on in this, and just again to like help somebody to get a better semblance of what that could be and how to really work with their specific challenges is better. It's not a one size fits all approach, clearly. And you have to, one of the things I got out of this sickness is just learning how to be my own best advocate.
Mm.
But it was hard because I didn't have those tools. So, like, you're giving the people the tools to be their own best advocate successfully, more so than having to fight so hard. And that's one of the best gifts that you could give to people with this sickness, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, that's the goal. Thank you. Yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely, like you said, I think it comes down to, everyone's experience is different. Everyone requires different things. Everyone, I don't know if I would have wanted a support group or not when I was going through treatment. I didn't know about them. but,
Uh,
but for some people it works and some people it doesn't. And having a Lyme literate therapist or not, right? Or having just different resources, right, is just so valuable, having the access to it. So yeah, I appreciate that. I think you hit it on the head. And I didn't realize that you started the support group while you were still going through being sick and
yeah.
everything. That's huge.
Yeah, as soon as the brain was well enough that I didn't stutter and I could somewhat talk again, I was like, we're gonna do this. And actually, I think that's how I figured out about co-infections too. I started to make quick tick tip videos that I posted to social media to tell people about this. And when I look back at those videos, I'm like, oh, I could see the Bell's palsy. I never noticed it before. But that's actually really what pushed me to go to a Lyme literate doctor instead of just my family doctor. And I'm really glad I did. It worked itself out, but I tried to avoid that just because I knew the expense that that was probably going to incur financially, and I really didn't want to do it. But as soon as I saw that my face wasn't moving right, I was like, nope, okay, I don't care how much I've got to pay. This face,
Mhm.
a little vain, yeah, okay, I don't want to look like that for the rest of my life. It sucks, and I can't believe no one told me that my
Yeah.
face isn't moving right. Like, what? Doesn't anybody notice? Like, how do people not notice that? My face is frozen on half of it, like I remember I'd asked someone, I was like, does my face look okay? Because it literally felt like it was melting off. And that person was like, yeah, you look totally fine. But yeah, no, not so much. But yeah, and I can see, like, I can remember, that's actually when I can remember. If I watch one of those videos, I can remember myself on that day and like talking myself into having enough energy to make my little video, to make my little quick tick tip video. I'll be like, okay, girl, here we go. And I start talking and it would be like, what did I just say? I don't even remember. Like my brain really was not better still then. It was better than it was, but
Mhm.
yeah. And so
Yeah, that's
yeah,
amazing.
like thanks, but like to your what you're developing is like I'm a perfect person for that kind of thing that would have really loved that, right? Like GPS, that was one of my best friends because I could program my car and at least I could remember where I was supposed to be driving to, right? Like
Yeah.
that saved me a lot of time. So, I mean, if I had an app that would tell me like, okay, this is what you need to be doing, this is when you need to be doing it, this is how you should be doing it, like that would be so beneficial.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what we're hoping. And I'm so excited to be finally getting to focus on this and work on this. And, yeah, we're looking forward to bringing it to the world soon.
I was
Um,
gonna say, and speaking of that, so like when is when is this coming?
Yes, we are building it now. Our goal is to hopefully have it in the summer at some point, be able to launch more broadly. We're working really closely with a subset of beta users, is what we call them. So we're
Right.
working directly with them to have them give feedback because this is obviously very sensitive. It needs to be done really well, and anything in healthcare, right? Especially tech in healthcare needs to be like very well tested and very intentionally done. And so we're really taking our time to make sure that this is correct and useful and all of that. Lyme patients have enough to deal with. They don't need to be questioning the tools that they're using. So
For
um,
sure.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
the goal is this summer to launch more broadly. But what we're doing now is working with beta users, and that's actually something. If anyone is interested, if they're listening, they can go on our website and put in their email, and they can stay up to date on our launch. And then also, notify or indicate interest of being a beta user if you want to work with us on it and sort of tell us about your experience. It can that's sort of one of the biggest things that we've spent a lot of time on in the last few months. I know you mentioned, we're coming at this with a lot of different experience, which is great, right? Siblings and kids and caretakers and patients and all of that, but we're still only one experience, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, we spent a lot of time talking to a bunch of patients and trying to really understand like what's going to be useful. And so there's an opportunity there too while we're building this out for the next few months if anyone's interested in giving feedback and helping us develop the best features. That's always an option too.
Yeah, awesome. And so what is it, lymeless.com or how?
Yep, lymeless.com. Yep.
Yep. So Lymelles.com if you're interested to do that. And I also I know your brother likes quotes, and I just heard one the other day that you made me think about um the lack of patience changes the outcome or something along those lines. And so just listening to you talk about that, right? Like we briefly touched on this before we started recording, but like if you do not put the right directions in there and you tell somebody the wrong thing, that can be obviously a big problem. So you really want to take your time and make sure that you do that well. And there is a time and place to not have patience, but this is one of those things that you certainly do want to take your time and make sure that you're developing well. And I'm sure there will be things that change as you go, but just it is something very serious. So if people are listening and they want to help to give some feedback or help them in developing this product, because again, this could be so useful in so many ways for people going through this illness, please don't hesitate to reach out and give them your support and feedback. It's one of the best things that we can do in this community is support each other and help each other with this kind of thing to advance the fight in Lyme and tick-borne illness, because that's really another thing that needs to happen. I know I mentioned in my intro, but if we think about that, the standard two-tier testing has been around now for about as long as I've been alive. And granted, I know it certainly has gotten better with time over here, but that's not anything to indicate what's happened with the testing with that. And it's 50%, 65% accurate, maybe we'll give it that. And that's just a complete disjustice to people because there's so many people who are struggling with this that don't realize it. And we're still stuck on antiquated technology for testing of people. So by making these kinds of tools, using the technology that we have, you're helping to advance where we stand culturally against something that is infecting 400 to 500,000 people a year alone in our country, in the United States alone. And I want people to really get the impact of this, right? Like this is not just a United States of America problem. This is a global epidemic. And we're talking about 500,000 people a year infected in our own country. That's more than HIV, AIDS, breast cancer, colon cancer, and hepatitis combined. The amount of funding we have going into this is a spit in the ocean. So things that Payton and her brother Carter are developing are crucial and essential. And it is through these grassroots efforts. I've got goosebumps going through my whole body right now. Like I just know how important this is for us. There are so many people that I talk to in our community that are developing things to help to make this a better space for us because we're not getting the support where we need it to be. And there's nobody to do it better than somebody who's gone through it themselves because we understand how crippling this can be and what this can turn into. So again, I just really want to applaud you for taking a stand and saying like, okay, I've been through this, but I know that I can do something better and I can do something different with this and make this situation better. And as Mahatma Gandhi says, we be the change that we want to be, right? Or be the change we want to see, be the change we want to be, however we want to put that. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I again, I'll just applaud you tremendously for that and having the wherewithal to get yourself through it, to get better again, to be here, to put something positive back into our community. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I can say the same to you. I mean, this is truly an incredible community to be a part of at the end of the day. It's a hard thing to go through. And it's, there's not words to describe how challenging it can be and how life altering, right? But, I think we're all looking for a better future. And it's amazing to be able to work on that together and with people like you. And, that's our biggest goal with this, with Lymeless, is to really unite people and bring us all together. And we're on the same team, right? We want to work alongside each other and make the future better for everyone. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we've maybe touched on it, but my favorite last question to ask people, um, what's the best thing that's happened to you as a result of getting Lyme and tick-borne illness?
That's a great question. Oh, I think the cliche, maybe cliche answer, now that you've heard me talk for a while about this, is sort of what we're building. But I think finding this purpose for my life, right? And you hear this from a lot of people that you're interviewing, but having this challenge, this experience with this very hard, very complex illness, combined with the blessing of getting through it, right? And coming to the other side and feeling better, and good enough to now make a difference, really created a purpose for me. And that's huge. I think that's something I was looking for forever, growing up and all of that. What am I going to do? And what am I going to focus on? How am I going to make a difference? And I feel so lucky to have this purpose that I know is actually going to help make people's lives better. Right. And even just one person would be incredible to me, because this is, such a hard thing to face alone. And it's such a hard thing to get through. But I think that's probably the biggest benefit, I guess, is yeah, having this thing to focus on, right? And try to make a difference in this community. It's huge.
Huge is right. And what great clarity we can gain from our contrast when we are going through things that are not really what we had signed up for, or we envisioned, or we wanted, or we chose, but we can come out with such clarity about really where our life purpose and our mission of work should be put towards. And I don't know why this makes me cry, but I just think about, I talk about it all the time. It's like, we're on a mission from God. We're on a mission from God. We are here to serve. We are here to help others. And if that's the purpose and that's what we get out of this, then it's a miracle in and of itself, right? Like, it's one of the greatest things that we could ever get out of this, is just having purpose and such surety of what we've been created to do. And I know it's not your end all be all of your whole life purpose and mission, but it's a big one. And I'm glad that you found it early on, and you can just continue to build and grow out of that. From such darkness, we can find such light, and it's a beautiful thing in the end, but very hard in the middle. And again, for those listening who are still stuck in the middle, remember myself, remember Payton, remember we were very sick individuals and we've gotten out of it. You can get out of it too. It's very possible to heal. You just have to figure out the right combination for your lock, or for your puzzle, or for whatever, however you want to think about that analogy. And listening to stories like Payton's, or signing up for her product when it's available, can hopefully again give you some greater insight to figure out how to get yourself out of that dark space faster. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have comments or questions, you can certainly reach out to myself or Payton. I'm sure she's available as well to field questions. And if you're, again, feeling compelled to participate in their beta formulation of their product, you can also go to their website at lymeless.com and get more information there. Thank you for listening.